The DECAMERON by Giovanni Bocasio. In a world where a deadly and terrifying plague stalks the city, a group of 10 nobles, ladies, and gentlemen flee for their lives, their hopes, survival, and their chances. That's the basic plot device of Giovanni Boccaccio's 14th century masterpiece, The DECAMERON. Completed around 1352, secluding themselves in a country estate and telling stories to keep their minds happily occupied. The young gentlefolk leave their homes in Florence, hoping to keep the deadly contagion at bay and leave their fears behind, at least for a while. Think of the Decameron as the 14th century. The Walking Dead replaced the flesh-eating zombies with plague victims and the guns with stories, and there you go. Bocasio tells us that this catastrophe led to the total breakdown of society and that people began to act unnaturally toward each other. Victims died helplessly while their neighbors watched. No one trusted anyone. Parents wouldn't even take care of their sick children. Florence, Italy of 1348 became like a post-zombie apocalyptic society. Except the dead stayed dead and the living went into hiding. More than half the people of Florence died in the epidemic. Bocasio, who had personal experience with the plague, he lost his father and second stepmother to it, creates a mini society of 7 ladies and 3 gentlemen who hit the road in order to escape the physical danger, societal breakdown, and misery that comes with the loss of entire families. Bocasio uses the group's flight to the country as a frame story. For 100 short tales, he knew what people love telling and hearing stories. The Brigata, the happy band, as this young and beautiful group of people is called, settle into a palace in the countryside near Florence and devise a storytelling game to entertain themselves and to keep from indulging in naughty deeds. The group elects a monarch each day who chooses a daily theme for storytelling and plans the fun. The 10 storytellers tell one story each every day for 10 days. That's 100 folk tales, tragedies, fabliaux, comedies, romances, and moral tales. Their stories about all kinds of people, kings and knights, priests and pirates, painters and bakers, winners and losers in love, all subject to the ups and downs and fortune. Bocassio's love of people and all their craziness shines through in his tales. They're some of the most gruesome, blasphemous, sexually explicit, and absolutely hilarious stories you'll ever read. The following are the important characters of the story of the Decameron written by Giovanni Bocasio. The Brigata. The members of our Brigata are too good to be true. All the women are smart, beautiful, witty, charming, and proper. The men are all handsome, witty, intelligent, and articulate. Everyone can dance and sing. As they stroll through the woods and gardens, picking flowers and enjoying the gentle breezes, they are a bit unreal. In fact, most Decameron scholars see them as symbolic characters who represent temperance, courtliness, intelligence, and other virtuous qualities. They are a pretty self-indulgent little group, determined to forget their worries by hiding out in a beautiful country estate while the rest of the Florentines are looking at bodies spilled in the streets. It's a pretty hilarious contrast to see these elegant medieval gentlemen and ladies telling and listening to the naughtiest, coarsest stories you can imagine. None of these characters are really fully developed. The stories themselves are the stars of this show, not the storytellers. The ladies are a little different, but it's really hard to tell most of them apart. Nevertheless, we'll try to tease out a few qualities of each of our little band. Pampinea. For Pampinea, this is a compliment. Her name is an adaptation of the Italian Pampino, which means vine leaf or and signifies blooming or flourishing one. Bocasio recycles the name from Zametto and Petrarch's Bucolicum Carmen. It's probable that her blooming nature is due to the fullness of her maturity. She is the oldest of the Brigata at the ripe age of 28, and at the height of her intelligence, wit, and beauty. We can tell from her confidence and decisive speech that she's a born leader. She's action-oriented. It's not surprising that she sets the journey in motion, proposes the storytelling game, and tells some of the wittiest stories out of 100. She also clever enough to invoke a superstitious belief in fortune to reassure the other woman that it's okay to step out with three young men who are romantically involved with some of them. Pampinea's self-sufficiency is apparent here, as she speaks the men as guides and servants, rather than referring to them as the head of women like Elisa. She is a disciplined woman who puts a great deal of thought into self-governance and happiness. When they reach the first palace, it's Pampinea who suggests the division of labor to provide for their entertainment and purposes the storytelling game. The purpose in this, of course, is to prevent boredom and discontent, not to mention sexual shenanigans. In depicting Papinea as intelligent and perspective, Boccasio's giving women, at least some, a vote of confidence. Dioneo. Dioneo has two possible namesakes. Dion, mother of Aphrodite, goddess of love and beauty, and Dionysius, the god of wine, partying, and reckless abandon. Either way, he's a good time guy. He's sometimes interpreted allegorically as the appetite or lust part of the soul. In the classical Greek, three-part understanding of the soul. If you were only to look at the stories that Dioneo tells, you might be tempted to agree with these. For the most part, they are bawdy in the extreme. Who can forget the hermit Rustico teaching the young Alibec who put the devil into hell, and often make the ladies worry they've risked their reputation by inviting him along. One of Dionysius' nicknames was the Liberator, because he encouraged people to leave their conventional ideas and behavior behind and explore new and more exciting possibilities. It's actually Dionys's impulse for exuberant expression that prompts Papinea to suggest that they come up with a scheme for occupying themselves innocently. Dioneo charmingly lets them know that he is not going to tolerate any buzzkills on his trip. He wants to make sure they leave their troubles behind after all. That's why he left Florence, right? It seems like he has the right idea when he mentions decorum. But Pampinea and the other ladies don't necessarily know what he considers decorum. And at the end of day 5, when he offers the most vulgar songs titles he can think of the queen, they probably have good reasons to doubt his intentions. Little do they know that Dioneo will become the self-designated guide and mood regulator of the crew. He's got a lot of what we'd call emotional intelligence. He has to tell his stories last every day because he will be able to gauge mood of the group and tell a story to balance things out. Philostrato. Philostrato, like Panfello, gets its name from the Greek. It's portmanteau, combo word meaning one crush or shut down by love. It's also the title of Boccasio's epic poem, Philostrato, which tells the tragic story of Troilus and his unfaithful Cressida. In that story, Troilus is the one who gets beaten up by love and having lost his heart, eventually dies in battle. Our Philostrato doesn't have such a heroic life, but he definitely suffers the disappointed love and he wants everyone to know about it. Presumably, he especially wants a certain person in the Brigata to feel his misery. We never really find out who it is, but it's believed that Philomena's the one, since Philostrato is dedicated to a Philomena. When he is elected king for fourth day, he chooses as his theme, what else? Loves that have ended unhappily. In case we didn't get the message, his personal cherry contribution to the day is a story about a woman who's tricked by his husband into eating a dish made from the actual heart of her murdered lover and then kills herself by jumping out the window. We know from Philostratus' sad and bitter song at the conclusion of that miserable day that the woman of his dreams dumped him for another. Like Troilus, Philostratus suffered from betrayal and is finding it hard to recover. The language in the song suggests that maybe she wasn't really his to begin with. She seemed to allow my love, and that his response might be a little extreme. It doesn't stop him from wishing for death to end his suffering, also like Troilus, or from expressing the high school literary magazine sentiment that no one can sing his song like he can, since no one else has ever suffered like he does. Philostratus' grief over losing his love isn't really so unfamiliar in this world, especially when you consider the concept of courtly love that Boccaccio portrays in many of the tales. Courtly love was primarily a literary love game with well-articulated rules like when made public love never endures and no one can be bound by a double love. It involved high-born characters and a lady who was usually unobtainable and had to be admired from afar. The gentleman supposed to do honorable deeds in his lady's name suffer in the silence and experience passion so intense that it makes him physically ill. Philomena. Philomena's name means lover of song or beloved, and we can see the connection to Philostrato because Boccaccio's work Philostrato about the ill-fated love of Troilus and Cressida was dedicated to Philomena. It's generally assumed that she is the cause of Philostratus' heartbreak in the Decameron. Her name also has mystical associations. Philomena is thought to be a play on Philomela, a princess in Greek mythology who was raped by her sister's husband and has her tongue torn out so she can tell it. But by weaving a tapestry, she can communicate the atrocity to her sister, who kills their son and cooks him up for the father. The husband chases the sisters down with an axe and they pray to the gods to be turned into birds. One of Philomena's stories stacks up pretty well against Philostratus' story of the beaten heart. In this lovely tale, a young woman's brothers murdered her love and dumped him in a grave. The dead lover appears to the lady in a dream and leads her to the grave, where she cuts off her lover's head and keeps it, decomposing but still recognizable in pot of basil, which she waters with her tears until she dies. Boccaccio says that Philomena's cautiousness leads her to object at first to Pompinea's bold scheme for leaving Florence, but Philomena's objection is a curious one for a woman to voice. Fiammetta. Fiammetta's name in Italian means little flame, and like most of the other storytellers, name is a recycled one. Bocasio uses the name in Filocolo, where Fiammetta's also a storyteller, and in the Iliad, where she's the protagonist whose lover Fanfello has abandoned her. Yes, we can't confirm this, nor can anyone else, but it's been said that the romance of the Iliad is the disguised story of Boccaccio's amour for Maria d'Aquino, a woman he met in Naples and who has reputed to be the illegitimate daughter of King Robert of Anjou. He apparently gave her the name Fiammetta so that he could use her character in his work. This also sheds some light on the detailed description we get of Fiammetta at the end for when Philostratos placing the crown on her head she has long golden curls that cascaded down over delicate pure white shoulders, a softly rounded face that glowed with the authentic hue of white lilies and crimson roses, a pair of eyes in her head that gleam like a falcon's, and a sweet little mouth with lips like rubies. As you probably guessed, the description represents a highly idealized form of female beauty. In probability, the humors swirling around Boccaccio's Fiammetta aren't true. That makes a great story and provides a tidy explanations for the recurrence of Fiammetta's name in just about everything we had written. Panfello. Panfello's totally different from the more troubled characters like Philostrato, Fiammetta, and Elisa. After all, his names derive from the Greek words for all loving or full of love. Panfello's a cheerful love machine, determined to be happy about his social situation and to love life even if the world around him is disintegrating. Love can fix anything, according to Panfello. In one of his stories, it even turns the disheveled town idiot into a well-dressed and proper gentleman. Although he burns with the fire of like any good courtly lover, he doesn't suffer psychological or physical pangs. Instead, Panfello feels an inexpressible joy. Happily for us, Panfello has a little bit of a history. Both he and Fiammetta appear as characters in Boccaccio's earlier work, the Iliad, the work rumored to be an autobiographical account of the secret love between a Neapolitan noblewoman called Maria Aquino, aka Fiammetta, and one Panfello, aka Bocasio. As a result, many scholars suggest that Panfello is an alter ego for the author. But remember, all of this is conjecture on the one hand, and educated guessing on the other. Take with a grain of salt and call us in the morning. Elisa. It seems that Elisa doomed for the beginning. She's named for Dido, Queen of Carthage. Elisa is a variant name for Dido, who was abandoned by her lover Aeneas and threw herself on the sword that he given her. It isn't until the end of her reign, on the sixth day, when Elisa performs her ballad, Love, If Ever From the Close I Break Free, that the members of the Brigata realize the depths of her despair. She's been crushed by disappointment in love. Philostrata could be her middle name. Unlike Philostrato, though she's able to forget her troubles at times and even banter with Dineo when he proposes some rather filthy songs titles to sing at the end of the fifth day. Her comrades greet the conclusion of her ballad, which speaks of a cruel lover and a witch for an end to her suffering, with stunned silence. They had no idea her stories never approach the tragic proportions for some of Philostratos or Philomena's tales. There's reason to feel optimistic about Elisa's prospects for recovery. In addition to her willing participation in the spirit of the storytelling game, she tells some of the best stories in the DECAMERON. She gives some hints that she hopes to move on from the disappointment. Nifil. Nifil is a stereotypically inexperienced young woman who blushes when she's elected queen. Hey, everyone's looking at her. She's also just as sweet and lovely as can be. Her youthful beauty, the ideal of innocence. Her face was like the rose that blooms at dawn in early summer, whilst her eyes, which she had lowered slightly, glittered and shone like a morning star. Even her blush with love is adorable. It becomes clear that she's in love with one of the three men in the brigada when she objects to Pampinea's plan to ask them along on the trip. Impossible, says Nifel, because the men are in love with some of the ladies. We never find out the name of her lover, but her song at the conclusion of day 9 is as optimistic as Disney princess as she awaits her prince. But of all her sweet, youthful beauty and first steps toward loves, Nifel is nobody's fool. She proves herself to be a good storyteller and singer. Although she's very modest and self-deprecating about her skills, she also a capable verbal sparring partner. Philostrato tries to make her blush by making a lewd comment about teaching the ladies a thing or two, but she's ready for him. No one expected such a response from a young Nifil, including Philostrato. It's Nifil who proposes a break from storytelling on the weekend so that they can fulfill religious obligations and take care of personal hygiene. She also suggests and arranges for the move to the second palace, showing that she's capable of making decisions for the crew despite the blushing. Lauretta. Lauretta is named in homage to Petrarch, whose beloved Laura was the subject of many beautiful canzoniere. We don't get much more insight into Lauretta's personality since she speaks very little other than to banter a bit with Philostrato and to retaliate playfully against Juneo by choosing a theme that corrects the naughtiness of his name. It's probable that Bocasio deliberately created Lauretta to be more of a type than a character with a complex inner life. Lauretta has a pretty hilarious moment of cutting loose in her first day, tales of a miser who gets his commute pants. She gets carried away with her disgust for the nobility of the present day, who unlike nobles in the good old days are better described as assess brought up, not in any court but on the dunch heap of all the scum of earth's iniquities. They spend the whole of their time in exchanging scandal with one another, sowing discord, describing acts of lewdness and ribaldry, left to wallow abjectly in a disease of vices. She has another quirky moment when Philostrato asks to her sing a song at the end of the third day. Lauretta replies that she only knows songs of her own composition. Philostrato replies graciously that any song of her making must be charming, and she's persuaded to sing the sorrowful Nana's need for lamentation more than have I. Emilia. In some ways, Emilia is much like Nifel. Both are young and shy and find themselves blushing on their coronation days. But the similarities pretty much end there. Emilia, unlike every other member of the Brigata, isn't in love with anybody else. She is, however, currently having a very fulfilling relationship with herself. In the song that she sings at the conclusion of the first day, Emilia proclaims, "In my own beauty, take I such delight, that to no one other love could I, my fond affections plight." She loves to dance and sing so that the others can watch her. She's unabashedly self-centered, and perhaps that's exactly the right quality for someone whose name means she allures. But despite her healthy self-confidence, she tells one of the most woman-hating stories in the world. The tale about King Solomon's advice about the occasional necessity of brutally beating your wife into submission. Emilia declares an open theme for her reign on day 9. She says that limiting the topic makes people into yoke oxen. So she wants to free things up and let everyone graze around freely in the meadows. There are comparisons between herself and Juneo on this score. That may be, but Emilia's no Juneo. She lacks his charisma and extroverted goodwill as well as his diplomatic skills.